morning and welcome. You are watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. A new book has now led to a new controversy. Lieutenant Colonel Purohit, a man betrayed. At first look is a book about Lieutenant Colonel Shrikant Prasad Purohit, who is facing trial for the Malegaon Blast case where 6 people were killed and 100 were injured in 2008. But the book actually talks about how the officer was made a pawn in a larger game. A game where the ultimate goal was to ensure that the theory of Hindu terror or Bhagwa Atankvad is floated and then strengthened. And where an impression is conveyed that from political parties to right-wing groups to even officers of the Indian Army, all are involved in fomenting this Hindu terror in India. But even before this book could be released, it has faced protests by those who are calling it an effort to whitewash a crime and even influence the ongoing investigation.
I think so. Now there shouldn't be any surprise in this country when an accused in bigger than this is sitting in the parliament. And about the gentleman you're talking about, everyone knows the history and the background, and still there are people from the government who are praising and supporting him openly. So what do you expect from all this?
The Malegaon blast and people related with this blast, it's a very serious issue which gets sub rogatis. In these circumstances, any sort of book which would be supportive of such people who are accused in the blast case, or we are still under the scanner, is being released, is highly controversial, and that's why obviously public sentiments are against such people, especially in the Malegaon bomb blast, which was serious incidents.
2008 साली मालेगाव मध्ये जो बॉम्बस्फोट झाला, त्यानंतर अजमेर शरीफ मध्ये बॉम्बस्फोट झाला, समझौता एक्सप्रेस मध्ये बॉम्बस्फोट झाला. या सगळ्या बॉम्बस्फोटाच्या घटनांमध्ये कर्नल पुरोहितचा खूप मोठा हात आहे आणि असा देशद्रोही माणूस ज्याच्यावर एनआय कोर्टामध्ये ट्रायल सुरू असताना एखाद्या पुस्तकाचं प्रकाशन जर होत असेल आणि त्यांचा गौरव होत असेल तर याला आमच्या सर्वांचा विरोध आहे.
So why are people unwilling to let even a book on Colonel Purohit come out, of what he underwent, where the case stands and the loopholes that it has? Let's take a look at some parts of this book and see if those give us a clue about why these protests are happening. One excerpt in the book says how for years reports were leaked and written in such a way that Hindu terror and Purohit, these words were then used synonymously. A decorated army officer was made the face of Hindu terror. The really chilling part, though, is the one that speaks of the torture that Colonel Purohit was subjected to. For the first time, it goes into details of how Purohit was beaten, abused and tortured. Strung up flat after being stripped to his underwear. Worse, officers of the ATS then took turns to beat him till the time he eventually passed out, all the while shouting, "Now you see what it feels like to beat a colonel of the Indian Army." Unable to take the pain, Purohit eventually passed out. This is just a part of what the book says. The case against Lieutenant Colonel Purohit is being heard, and eventually it's only courts of India who will decide its outcome. The question though is, why is there an attempt to try even block anyone who tries to tell the story of what Purohit went through? Doesn't everyone deserve to have their side of the story heard, or is it important to have some stories withheld? Otherwise they'll end up puncturing some long-standing narratives, like the narrative that has now endured for 14 years, that of India breeding Hindu terror.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, joining us now on the debate, political analyst Asif Sohail, lawyer Shahid Ali, Kamar Zaman Chaudhary, leader of the Congress, national spokesperson of BJP Sanju Verma. But first I want to go across to author Smita Mishra. Smita Mishra, is this an effort by you to try and whitewash a crime?
On the contrary, after working for nearly 4 years on the book Padmaja, the fact remains that people have been whitewashing things, brushing them under the carpet and bringing a false narrative in front of the country without thinking even once what kind of a damage to the national witnesses floating in bits and parts in the public domain, but nobody cared to pay attention to them because reporters were ready to take dictation from some sources and not even go and try to check or examine what they were writing. I have just put it together, threaded it together, and tried to tell everybody that all these things which were floating in bits and pieces here and there, they were actually part of a much bigger dragnet. I have put them in a perspective and brought it before the people, and that is all that I have done. The whitewashing has been going on since 2008. So what you are asking me is actually to be asked to the other side.
But anyway, this matter is now in court. Anything that you say, these accounts that you have, putting out brutal description of torture, isn't that likely to influence the case, the hearing?
The debate on Hindu terror, Padmaja, is not sub judice. People have been talking about it, giving statements, going to extremes to talk about it for last 13, 14 years. So number one, the debate on Hindu terror, the politics on Hindu terror is not sub judice. People sitting in highest offices have talked about it. Regarding the ongoing trial, let me tell you, you have read the book, I presume. People who are protesting against it, I can tell you with full confidence, they must not have read even the first chapter of the book. Had they even read the preface or the first chapter, they would have understood there is not a word on the ongoing trial. So that settles the sub judice allegation. And in a country where, when Kasab was in jail, investigation was on, the entire conspiracy was unraveling. A bravest man of this nation, Tukaram Omble, had already sacrificed his life to protect all of us. At that point of time, there was a book trying to say that the 26/11 Mumbai attack, the worst attack on Indian soil, terror attack ever, was a conspiracy of the RSS. People sitting in high positions launched that book with a lot of fanfare. That can be allowed. But my book is supposed to influence people. Please go back. And I would request the protesters also to not just take a dictation from some elements, to do some due diligence. Please go back to the order by the Apex Court when a movie called Ayari was being released. Just before the release, some people went to court demanding a ban on the release of the book. Kindly go and see what the Apex Court had said in its order at that time. It is actually the other people who I think do not have faith either on the competence of the trial courts or the diligence and competence of our investigating agencies. Do they really think a book of 200 odd pages, which has been threaded together with material in the public domain, is going to influence the decision of the court? The courts are going to go strictly by evidence, or even agencies. I mean, is this the impression they have of our courts or the agencies?
Okay,
it is actually they who are undermining.
Let me finally ask you this. Hindu terror is something that we have woken up to in 2008, around 2002, as you mentioned in your book. It was first brought up in the aftermath of the Godhra riots. Now, in your research, if I could ask you to tell me 3 things that you found out which surprised you about Hindu terror versus facts.
Yes. So we were thinking that there were some elements who were interested in bringing this, creating a smoke screen, a bogey of Hindu terror. But in the course of my conversations, my interviews, my research work, and as I have already written in the book, I have spoken to a whole lot of people whom I cannot name there. Only a very few of them could have been named. I am extremely grateful to all of them who could not be named, but they have helped put together this effort. I learned from them that this entire bogey of Hindu terror was actually created at the highest level of the political leadership at that time, is one. The second is the details of that RDX plant theory, which was put out, because after all, that is, in the end, that is the whole, the crux of the case, that the RDX was provided by Lieutenant Colonel Purohit. And the third and the most important was this whole story about Abhinav Bharat. Abhinav Bharat had Colonel Purohit is being shown as if he built together, a group of people came together and they wanted to do blasts all over the country. It was actually the other way around. The Abhinav Bharat was already functioning at the behest of some big people. Colonel Purohit only infiltrated into it. And finally, very quickly, incidents where we found that there were entire confessions, Safdar Nagauri, Arif Kasmani, people like them, they had already accepted that they did the blasts at Samjhauta, in the Samjhauta Express in Haryana or other places.
Okay.
When the real terrorists, the perpetrators were ready to accept their charge, that had been turned into Hindu terror overnight. It just doesn't add together. It's baffling.
Okay, it doesn't add up. Ultimately, it is for the courts to put together the pieces. But for one piece to also be added via this book, why is it inviting such strong protests? Smita Mishra, thank you very much for having spoken to us. And let me take that question across to the panel joining us now. Qamar Zaman Chaudhary, that question to you. It's a book. It has one part of the puzzle. Yeah. Take it or leave it. Why protest it? Why demand a boycott?
No, Padmaja, good evening. I have been listening to Smita Mishra out here. One thing that I can fathom out here, the entire crux of her book, though I have not read it, but it seems whatever I could fathom from her interview is an agenda-based narrative that she tried to build up in her book. You know,
I love how you actually start by saying, sir, that I haven't read it. I don't know nothing about what it has. But no. I am willing to pass judgment that it is nothing but agenda based. You haven't read a word, let me underline, but you have divined the agenda. Anyhow, go on, sir.
No, I told you whatever I have learned from the interview that you had just now with Madam Mishra.
Okay.
The point why I am coming to that, you will not let me permit. The perspective she put out in your interview is an agenda based. Why I say this? Who is Colonel Purohit, the late Colonel Purohit?
He's not late. He's very much alive,
you know,
sir.
Indian
Why are you now? First of all, you haven't read the book. Now you have killed Colonel Purohit also. He's out on bail.
No. I'm very sorry. The Colonel Purohit is on bail. Now, who is he? He has not yet been pronounced guilty. He is an accused in the case. Now, if I say that this book is a gospel truth in the Colonel Purohit case or the Malegaon Masjid blast, then can you take the same comparison across to the Gujarat files, wherein Rana Ayub wrote a book
which, by the way, sir, let me remind you, since everyone starts talking about the Gujarat files, the Gujarat files was released, it was read, it continues to be sold in the country, as should any book. Ultimately, the fact that it was also called out by a court as being largely devoid of facts, aside of the fact that ultimately it was the Supreme Court of our country which adjudicated on this entire thing that Gujarat Files talks about as nothing more than a concoction of various lies, is entirely up to the people. My question is, why would you not want to have a book released? Why is it important to suppress a book? 26/11 RSS ki ek sazish can be released in India. My brother Headley can also be released in India, where David Coleman Headley is described as somebody's brother, gym partner, etc. You can even have from Dongri to Dubai, which speaks of Dawood Ibrahim and how the poor boy rose when he was, tormented by his father, released and read, rightly so in India. But you cannot have this book released and read in India. Why is that?
Padmaja, again you are having a monologue. Again you are having a monologue. Permit me 10 more seconds. Now just let me correct you once. In your starting introduction, you said that this is a case wherein Hindu terror was invented in the country.
Yes.
You are wrong. We never said Hindu terror. We said Hindutva terror.
That is not
and there are hundreds of examples.
Actually,
of
I will quote
terror.
To you what Mr. Chidambaram said, Mr. Shinde said, and most importantly, Rahul Gandhi said to Timothy Romer, which was revealed in a US cable. This whole little thing of हमने हिंदू ने हिंदुत्व बोला था is not correct. I will quote to you what Mr. Gandhi said, but just a second. It's very curious. It's very curious. Just a second. Sanju Verma, it's very curious. 2014. The Modi government comes in power. 2016, suddenly these cases start falling apart. can't be a coincidence. And now this book, which Qamar Zaman Chaudhary says is also...
Or Hinduism from Kamru Zaman. Now let me, I did not interrupt him. I quickly want to play some facts before you. Let's be very clear. 268 witnesses, more than 500 pages of charge sheet, and more than 29 witnesses who then turned hostile. I just want to say one thing to you, that all the witnesses who turned hostile, there were a couple of things that were common. When questioned in court, can you recognize Colonel Purohit, because he was there? None of them could recognize Colonel Purohit. A couple of them said, we had never even heard of Avinav Bharat, because remember, Avinav Bharat was implicated in this entire controversy as a right-wing Hindu terror outfit. Third point, all the 29 witnesses who turned hostile, two among them were army personnel. They also said that the statements that we gave to the police are very different from the statements that were read out on our behalf in the court. And this is documented in the Bombay High Court, proceedings. The other important point I want to make is this, that forget what BJP is saying, forget also what Smita, the author Smita Mishra is saying. Look at what the then Nasik Superintendent of Police, who was investigating the case hands-on, Mr. Rajyavardhan, a very respected DGP of Maharashtra then, Mr. Pasricha, and the NIA court in 2011, headed by Prashant Sitre. Please, Padmaja.
Okay, one at a time, please. We are talking about people who have been associated with the case, sir. For a change, we are talking about facts and not general impressions about agenda. Please, Mr. Chaudhary, I'll come back to you. 30 seconds, Sanju Verma, conclude what you're saying. Yes.
Padmaja, the point is, each time, the bluff of this bigoted lot is called out, they start rattling and start getting rattled. Let me now say, what the NIA court led by Special Judge Prashant Sitre said in 2011 when the Congress was in power, the BJP was not in power, and Prashant Sitre made these statements on the basis of evidence given by the then Nasik SP, Rajyavardhan, and the then DGP of Maharashtra, Mr. Pasricha. Prashant Sitre said, there is nothing to suggest that the accused carried out the blasts, and there is nothing to suggest that the witnesses could either recognize who carried out the blast. Not only Colonel Purohit, they said that even Samir Kulkarni, Sudhakar Dwivedi and Sudhakar Chaturvedi, the other perpetrators, they were given a clean check because the court said that the witnesses gave statements to the magistrate under the CRPC. But those statements never found their way to the Bombay High Court. The forensic evidence never found its way to the Bombay High Court. So please don't sit here and give a bhashan unless you want to question.
Effort to try and concoct an entire case. Shahid Ali, my question to you also is, here is the important part. But first there was an arrest, then you have an army officer who is from the military intelligence. He was picked up. By the way, his arrest wasn't shown until much later. And this he has put in his 2 petitions to the NHRC. But more importantly, what he says in his petitions is the way that he was treated, where he says he was stretched out at 180 degrees, was compelled to sit up with his back erect by one man, constantly kicking and forcing him from behind. This put intolerable pressure on his thighs and groin, sending a shooting pain first in his limbs, then his entire body. Unable to bear the excruciating pain, he soon fainted. A constable would stand behind Purohit holding a thick log at his waist level. Another, on the orders of Parambir Singh, Arun Khanvilkar and Mohan Kulkarni, or all 3, would pull the ropes tied to his ankles with a great force and then release them suddenly, making him bang against the log with tremendous force, causing a terrible impact on his lower back and waist. This latest torture formula continued for at least another 3 days. Why shouldn't the country know this is what happened? And this, by the way, is detailed in petitions that have been made to the NHRC. These are as much facts of the case as people who claimed saffron terror is the biggest threat right now in front of the country, and that Shrikant Purohit is one of the people responsible. Shahid Ali. These are just facts.
Padmaja, in criminal proceedings, there are the stages. stages comes when the statement of accused would be required or would be that's recorded by the court. Then the accused side would be able to put on record the defense, whatever defense they have. By virtue of releasing this book at this stage and holding a debate and hear the statement of Sanju Verma and Mrs. Mishra, these all statements are, if we put together, there is an attempt to create an atmosphere, a public opinion against the ongoing trial.
So
in
tell
fact,
me,
this
sir,
is
when Siddique Kappan was not being given bail by the Allahabad High Court, there were people who are senior lawyers of the Supreme Court, intelligentsia, academics, who carried out a march saying release Siddique Kappan. Were they then trying to pressure the judiciary in trying to give him bail? That is supposed to be a part of civil liberties where you ask. In fact, a senior politician went and met the family of Siddique Kappan and said that he has been wrongly incarcerated by the UP government. Despite the fact that a few days later, the Allahabad High Court denied him bail, saying Siddique Kappan had no business being in Hathras. Why, sir, is the support for Siddique Kappan a part of democracy, but a book on Colonel Purohit is about creating a narrative and whitewashing a crime? Why?
Padmaja, if you had such kind of grievances, you are always open to approach the Honorable
Sir, I have no grievances. Just like Siddique Kappan deserves to have senior journalists, senior academics, senior Supreme Court lawyers take out marches for him and write blogs, so does Colonel Purohit. Why should Colonel Purohit have a book written about him?
Both things cannot stand on similar footings.
Why?
Please try to understand, the stage of bail is different than the criminal proceedings.
Sir, I am asking you a simple question. You are hinging on technicalities. My question to you is simple. One man is in jail accused of a crime. Another man is in jail accused of a crime. And in one's case, there are appeals being made to release him. And on the other, when his story is put out, it is called whitewashing a crime.
To influence the judgments.
How? How?
By virtue of releasing this book, this is a clear attempt, clear exercise, clear endeavor.
Okay, just a second, Sanju Verma. Let me try and understand this. So let me just ask you this, Mr. Ali, since you are a very senior lawyer, when you have Sudha Bharadwaj in jail, nobody should take out a candlelight march for her demanding her release, right? Because that would be an attempt to influence the judgment.
Padmaja, I am again reiterating my words. If anybody had grievance against that kind of protest or leading marches,
I think everyone in a democracy should have their voice heard. I don't have any grievance against Siddique Kappan, those who support him, those who demand his bail, and I don't have any grievance against Lieutenant Colonel Purohit or those who want his story heard. Why should he be shut up?
Padmaja, if you will not allow to speak, then
sir, he is as much an Indian as Siddique Kappan.
What is the purpose that I am sitting over here? If you will not allow to speak, if you will try to get my mouth at this juncture,
I haven't gagged your mouth, sir.
Speak even a single word. Then what is the purpose of I am sitting here?
30 seconds. Go on. What is your point other than the fact that it's an attempt to influence? That is your point, right?
If you hear the statement of Mrs. Mishra, statement of Ms. Sanju Verma and other respected persons, you will clearly understand that public opinion is being trying to make. Public opinion is being trying to create it.
But
against
sir, okay.
the investigations done by
so
the investigating
sir, as a lawyer, you should know
and the matter is,
that it is the court of India which decides, not the court of public opinion. But in court of public opinion, you have already branded him a traitor, so he should be branded a traitor and should stay that way. Sanju Verma. Court of public opinion is being manipulated. Sanju Verma.
Okay. Padmaja, I have a great memory, and I remember that I was in a debate with Mr. Shahid Ali, a couple of months back, or rather weeks back, on the Umar Khalid, WhatsApp chats that were out and which implicated him, and the Delhi High Court had denied him bail. And that time Shahid Ali was sitting on this debate on national television on Padmaja show and supporting Umar Khalid. You can support Umar Khalid, but Smita Mishra cannot write a book on Colonel Purohit. Why? Are you a better citizen?
Verma, I never.
Do you want to treat Hindus as second-class citizens? Stop giving a bhashan on morality. Padmaja.
And by the way, sir, let me remind you that if every book is supposed to be painted as creating a narrative and influencing judgment, even when the Gujarat riots case was still sub judice, Gujarat Files was released. It was released in Delhi, and I want everyone to know that there were senior members of a political party who were present at the release of that book, at least in Delhi, for sure. So is that also an effort to try and create a narrative about the Gujarat riots investigation? Then you must accept that sauce for goose is sauce for gander. Anyway, finish your point, Sanju Verma, 20 seconds.
Thank you. Yes, Padmaja, I just quickly want to say one thing. I think the witness of the statement of Brigadier Rajkumar is very important in this entire Colonel Raj Purohit case. And because, Colonel Raj Purohit ke khilaf jo sabse bada aaroप tha, that was that he was caught with RDX in his possession, and that was supposed to be the nail pin. And I will just 10 seconds tell you what Brigadier Rajkumar has said. We had gone into details of the case. Army is very sensitive to this particular allegation. I had written to the then Northern Command based in Udhampur to ascertain his posting and if he had any access to RDX. They informed me that though he was in Srinagar for a while, he was not involved in handling of RDX. It was not given to him or to anyone in his battalion for any particular operation. This is Brigadier Rajkumar's statement to the NIA, saying that Colonel Purohit had no RDX in his possession. So यहाँ बैठकर please भाषण मत दीजिए, पढ़ लिख कर आया कीजिए डिबेट के लिए.
Asif Sohail, for the longest time, there was many reports, there were opinion columns which had already condemned Colonel Purohit to the gallows as a terrorist before the trial is even over. Now you've got all the other pieces of evidence being put out in public domain. Again I say, the court will decide. But till that time, don't the people of India have the right to know the full picture? The full picture, for example, and it's not just about doing chilla chilli saying ye terrorist hai, ye innocent hai, ye terrorist hai, ye innocent hai. For example, you had the NIA which actually shot down the ATS investigation. When Makoka charges were dropped against Colonel Purohit, the central agency said that the confessional statements were obtained by the ATS after the agency threatened witnesses that they would be implicated in false cases. And I went on to say that ATS recorded the statement of one witness who confessed to having served tea and eavesdropped during the 3 meetings of Abhinav Bharat held in Bhopal, Faridabad and Nashik to plot the Malegaon Blast. NIA said this witness never went to Bhopal, did attend the Nashik meeting and couldn't even hear the discussions while serving tea and snacks to the attendees. So here you have the agency saying that all of these statements, which were then used as fodder to say this man was some kind of criminal mastermind who jumped from city to city, planning blasts, procuring RDX and exhorting people to rise up against Muslims, that man was threatened. That statement was under duress.
Padmaja ji, first of all, I want to congratulate for starting a Times Now courtroom. आप लोग एक मीडिया ट्रायल चलाते थे, अब जुडिशियल ट्रायल भी स्टार्ट कर दिए हैं. एंड सेकेंड थिंग, आई विल नॉट कॉल हिम एज अ कर्नल पुरोहित, ही इज नो मोर कर्नल. उनके ऊपर एक देशद्रोही के ऊपर एक उनके ऊपर केस चल रहा है, ठीक है. लेट द केस इज गोइंग ऑन, लेट द इट गेट कंप्लीटेड. व्हाई वी आर कमिंग ऑन द कंक्लूजन एंड व्हाई वी हैव बीन टेकिंग ऑन द नैरेटिव ऑफ द हिंदुत्व आइडियोलॉजी बुक्स. कब से जो सो किताबों के ऊपर जो सो जजमेंट वो होगा, मुझे बताइए आप.
सर, जजमेंट कोई नहीं कर रहा है. किताबें इसलिए लिखी जाती हैं ताकि लोगों को हर चीज पता रहे और देन दे कैन मेक अप देयर ओन माइंड.
कंप्लीट करने दीजिए. देखिए, कोई भी देखिए मैडम, एक सिख सोच से, एक बीमार सोच से अगर कोई किताब लिख रहा है, उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि वो कोई फ्रीडम फाइटर है. पुरोहित ना कोई सो सेंट है, वो उनके ऊपर कोई आपका क्यों टाइम खराब कर रहे हैं.
किताबें इसीलिए लिखी जाती हैं that we don't have this kind of illiterate commentary where somebody comes on television and makes completely unsubstantiated arguments like उनका कोई rank नहीं है. First of all, he retains his full rank. Second of all, he is innocent until proven guilty. And third, nobody is talking about this book as the ultimate judgment. It is only about a place where people know the full picture and then wait for the court judgment. I'm going to leave it at that, sir. Like I said, everyone should read more, talk less, and not be taken in by randomly bandied about opinion. When you make up your own mind based on facts available to you, that will be the best judgment before the one that comes from the courts. Thanks very much, all gentlemen, and Sanju Verma for joining me.